I never thought a windmill could become the center of an HOA disaster. But when my HOA decided it was an unsightly structure and ordered it removed, they had no idea what that windmill actually powered. They thought they were cutting down an old piece of metal. They were actually shutting down a system the entire property depended on. My name is Daniel Carter, and the windmill had been on my land long before the HOA was ever created. It stood at the edge of my property, about 30 feet tall, with weathered metal blades turning slowly whenever the wind picked up. To most people, it looked old-fashioned. To me, it was infrastructure. The windmill powered a mechanical pump connected to an underground water system that helped supply several agricultural and drainage pumps on my property. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't abandoned. And it definitely wasn't part of the HOA's common property. But the HOA president, Karen Whitmore, didn't see it that way. One afternoon, I received an official notice. The HOA claimed the windmill violated the community's appearance standards. They demanded that I remove it within 30 days. I immediately responded. I explained that the windmill was located on my private property and had existed there before the HOA development. I also explained that it powered essential pumping equipment. Karen dismissed the explanation. She said the structure was visually incompatible with the neighborhood. I asked her one simple question. Do you understand what this windmill is connected to? She replied, it doesn't matter. That sentence would come back to haunt the HOA. A few days later, I found several HOA representatives standing near the windmill. A contractor was with them. I walked outside and asked what they were doing. Karen handed me another notice. She said the HOA had decided to proceed with removal. I told her they didn't have permission to touch anything on my property. She insisted they were enforcing community rules. I warned them again. I told them that removing the windmill could stop the pumps. Karen laughed. She said, it's a windmill, not a power station. Then the contractors started cutting. The first support cable came loose. The windmill shook. I told them to stop. They didn't. Within minutes, the old structure came crashing down. The blade struck the ground. The tower collapsed across the grass. And suddenly, everything went quiet. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Karen looked satisfied. She told the contractor the problem was solved. Then, about an hour later, I heard an alarm coming from the pump control building. I opened the door. Several pumps had stopped. The system pressure was dropping, and the backup equipment wasn't starting properly. That's when I knew the HOA had made a much bigger mistake than destroying an old windmill. I called the utility company. A technician arrived and began inspecting the pumping system. He checked the control panels. He checked the electrical connections. Then he asked me a question. What happened to the wind-driven pump? I told him the HOA had removed it. He immediately stopped working. He asked to authorize the removal. I explained everything. The technician looked at the damaged equipment and shook his head. He told me the windmill wasn't simply supplying water. It was part of a larger pumping and pressure balancing system. Removing it had disrupted the system's normal operation. The utility company wasn't angry with me. They were concerned because the pumping failure was affecting equipment connected to the property. And suddenly, the HOA's little appearance complaint had become an infrastructure problem. The utility company sent additional engineers. They inspected the system and documented the failure. Their report confirmed that the windmill had been an operational component. Karen still tried to defend the HOA. She said nobody could have known the windmill was important. But I had warned her more than once. I had told her exactly what it powered. And now I had the messages to prove it. My attorney sent the HOA a formal demand. It included the cost of replacing the damaged equipment, restoring the pumping system, reconstructing the windmill, and repairing the surrounding infrastructure. The number shocked everyone. The HOA had expected a simple removal project. Instead, they were facing a major restoration bill. And there was another problem. The windmill was located entirely on private property. The HOA didn't own it. They didn't maintain it. And they hadn't received permission to remove it. The board meeting that followed was completely different from the first one. There was no laughter, no jokes about ugly structures, no talk about neighborhood aesthetics. Instead, The board members sat quietly while their attorney explained what had happened. Karen finally admitted that she had been told the windmill powered the pumps. She had simply believed the information wasn't important. That statement changed everything. The HOA agreed to pay for the necessary restoration. The pumping system was repaired. The windmill was rebuilt with stronger supports and updated safety equipment. And the HOA changed its enforcement procedures. From that point forward, no one was allowed to remove or modify structures on private property without verifying ownership and utility connections first. A few weeks later, I stood beside the rebuilt windmill. The new blades turned slowly in the afternoon wind. Below it, the pumps were running again. Water moved through the system exactly as it was supposed to. Karen drove past the property that evening. She looked toward the windmill. This time, she didn't complain. She didn't wave. She just kept driving. And honestly, that was fine with me, because the windmill had taught everyone in the neighborhood a lesson. You can't judge infrastructure by appearance. Something that looks old might be essential. Something that looks useless might be keeping an entire system alive. And before you tear something down just because you don't like how it looks, you better find out what stops working when it disappears.